The mahogany-paneled conference room at the Thompson family law firm buzzed with the familiar energy of our quarterly business meeting. Michael Thompson, my older brother by 3 years, dominated the conversation from his position at the head of the table, his perfectly tailored Armani suit and gold Rolex catching the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. As the managing partner of Thompson & Associates, he never missed an opportunity to remind everyone in the room, and especially me, of his professional superiority. Revenue is up 18% this quarter, Michael announced, spreading the quarterly reports across the conference table like a poker player revealing a winning hand. The pharmaceutical liability case alone brought in $4.2 million in fees. It's what happens when you pursue serious professional careers instead of playing around in community health clinics. The comment was directed at me, of course. Dr. Emma Thompson, the family disappointment who had somehow managed to waste her medical degree on what Michael consistently referred to as glorified social work. I sat quietly in my simple navy blazer, sipping coffee from a paper cup while my family members discussed their various business achievements around the polished table. My sister-in-law, Victoria, a successful pharmaceutical sales director, nodded approvingly at Michael's presentation. It's impressive what real ambition can accomplish. Speaking of which, Emma, are you still working at that little clinic in the downtown area? The one with all the underprivileged patients. Westside Community Health, I confirmed, keeping my voice neutral. Yes, I'm still there. Michael leaned back in his leather chair, his expression mixing condescension with what he probably thought was brotherly concern. Emma, you're 34 years old with an MD from Johns Hopkins. Do you realize what you could be earning in private practice? Or better yet, hospital administration? Instead, you're wasting your talent on charity cases and government healthcare programs. Our father, retired Judge Harrison Thompson, chimed in from his position near the window. Your brother has a point, sweetheart. You have so much potential, but you're not maximizing your opportunities. Michael built this firm into a powerhouse by thinking strategically about his career. Maybe it's time you considered doing the same. Dad's right, Michael continued, warming to his favorite topic. Clinic worker isn't a real medical career. It's what people do when they can't handle the pressure of real medicine. You're basically a government employee with a medical degree, treating people who can't pay for proper health care. I stirred my coffee slowly, listening to the familiar refrain. This conversation happened every few months, usually triggered by some new success story Michael wanted to share about his legal practice or some article he'd read about physician salaries in private practice. The thing is, Michael continued, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he'd perfected over years of courtroom work, you're not even practicing real medicine. You're doing basic primary care, prescribing antibiotics, handling minor procedures. Any nurse practitioner could do what you're doing. You're operating below your training level. Victoria nodded enthusiastically. Michael showed me the salary data for emergency medicine physicians. You could be making 3 times what you earn at that clinic. And the prestige factor, being an ER doctor at a major hospital versus working at a community health center? There's no comparison. My phone buzzed with a text message from my chief financial officer. Q3 hospital network revenues, $847 million. Board meeting scheduled for Thursday. I glanced at it briefly before returning my attention to my family's career counseling session. I appreciate the concern, I said quietly, but I'm satisfied with my work at Westside. Michael laughed, the same condescending chuckle he'd used since we were children. Satisfied? Emma, satisfaction doesn't pay for retirement. It doesn't build wealth. You're essentially throwing away your medical degree on a job that any mid-level provider could handle. It's career suicide. The conversation continued in this vein for another hour, with various family members offering their perspectives on my professional shortcomings. My uncle Robert, who owned a chain of urgent care centers, suggested I could work for him, doing real medicine with paying customers. My cousin Jennifer, married to an orthopedic surgeon, shared stories about their recent vacation to Tuscany, funded by her husband's lucrative spine surgery practice. Through it all, I maintained my composure, occasionally nodding or offering brief responses. They had no idea that my position at Westside Community Health was strategic, a way to stay connected to frontline patient care while managing my other responsibilities. They didn't know that my modest Honda Accord was parked next to a Tesla and 2 BMWs in my private garage, or that the tiny apartment they imagined I lived in was actually a penthouse overlooking the city. As the meeting wound down, Michael's phone rang. His expression shifted from confident to concerned as he listened to the caller. What do you mean irregular heartbeat? When did this start? Okay, I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up and turned to the room, his previous swagger replaced by visible worry. Victoria's been having chest pains and irregular heart rhythms. Her cardiologist wants to admit her for immediate evaluation. Possible cardiac catheterization, maybe even emergency surgery. The family's attention immediately shifted to Michael's crisis. Business discussions forgotten as we processed this unexpected medical emergency. Victoria, who had been radiating health and confidence moments earlier, suddenly looked pale and frightened. Which hospital? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. St. Catherine's Medical Center, Michael replied, gathering his papers hastily. It's where her cardiologist has privileges. Dr. Martinez says they have the best cardiac surgery program in the region. I nodded, familiar with both the hospital and Dr. Martinez. That's good. You'll be in excellent hands there. Emma, would you mind coming with us? Victoria asked, her voice trembling slightly. I know you're not a cardiologist, but having a doctor in the family there might be helpful. Even if you're just a clinic worker, you understand medical terminology better than we do. Of course, I replied, already calculating the drive time to St. Catherine's and mentally reviewing Victoria's risk factors based on her family history and lifestyle. The ride to the hospital was tense, with Michael alternating between aggressive driving and worried phone calls to various family members. Victoria sat in the passenger seat, monitoring her heart rate with her fitness tracker and describing her symptoms in increasingly anxious detail. We arrived at St. Catherine's Medical Center as the sun was setting, the imposing glass and steel structure illuminated against the darkening sky. The cardiac unit was on the 7th floor, accessible through a dedicated elevator that required special access cards, a security measure I'd implemented 3 years earlier during the hospital's major renovation and expansion project. Dr. Martinez met us in the cardiac consultation room, his expression serious as he reviewed Victoria's test results. The EKG shows some concerning irregularities, and her cardiac enzymes are elevated. I want to perform an emergency cardiac catheterization to evaluate for blockages, and depending on what we find, she may need immediate surgical intervention. What kind of surgery? Michael asked, his legal training kicking in as he processed the medical information. Potentially bypass surgery or minimally invasive valve repair. The exact procedure will depend on what we discover during the catheterization. However, any major cardiac surgery at this hospital requires approval from our chief of surgery before we can proceed. Michael's face tightened with frustration. How long does that approval process take? Victoria needs immediate care, not bureaucratic delays. It's not bureaucratic, Dr. Martinez explained patiently. It's a quality control measure. Our chief of surgery reviews all high-risk cases to ensure optimal outcomes. But don't worry, she's extremely experienced and typically very responsive to emergency consultations. A nurse approached our group, tablet in hand. Dr. Martinez, the chief of surgery, is here for the consultation. Should I bring her in? Please do, Dr. Martinez replied. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, you'll find that our chief of surgery is exceptional. She's pioneered several cardiac procedures and has one of the best success rates in the country. Your wife will be in excellent hands. The consultation room door opened and I walked in carrying Victoria's medical files, having changed into my surgical scrubs and white coat. The nameplate on my coat read, Dr. Emma Thompson, MD, Chief of Cardiovascular Surgery. Hello, Michael, I said calmly, settling into the chair across from my brother and opening Victoria's chart. Dr. Martinez has briefed me on Victoria's condition. I've reviewed her test results and I believe we can help her. The silence that followed was profound. Michael's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension as he processed what he was seeing. Victoria stared at me with wide eyes, as if trying to reconcile the clinic worker from the family meeting with the chief of surgery sitting before her. Emma. Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. What? How? You're the chief of surgery? I am, I confirmed, turning to Victoria's EKG readings. I'm also the director of cardiac services and a member of the hospital's board of directors. Now let's focus on Victoria's treatment. Based on these results, I recommend immediate catheterization followed by minimally invasive bypass surgery. We can likely avoid opening the chest entirely. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Dr. Thompson is being modest. She developed the minimally invasive technique she's recommending. It's been adopted by cardiac programs nationwide and significantly reduces recovery time. As the medical team prepared Victoria for her procedures, Michael pulled me aside in the hallway. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by a mixture of amazement and bewilderment. Emma, I don't understand. You work at a community clinic. You drive an old car. You live in a small apartment. How are you the chief of surgery at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the region? I smiled, checking Victoria's preoperative orders on my tablet. Michael, I work 1 day a week at Westside Community Health because I founded it 5 years ago to provide cardiac care to underserved populations. The rest of my time is spent here at St. Catherine's, where I've been chief of cardiovascular surgery for 7 years. But why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were just a clinic worker? Because every time I tried to share anything about my actual work, you dismissed it as not real medicine or charity work. You decided what my career was worth before you ever bothered to learn what I actually do. The truth continued to unfold as Victoria underwent her procedures. Michael learned that the little apartment I supposedly lived in was actually the penthouse level of the medical building adjacent to the hospital, designed for the convenience of the chief of surgery during emergency situations. The old Honda was my backup vehicle, used when I wanted to maintain a low profile at family events. But the biggest revelation came when Dr. Martinez mentioned the hospital's recent expansion project. Dr. Thompson's vision really transformed this place, he told Michael as we waited outside the catheterization lab. Her donation of $12.5 million funded the new cardiac wing, and her surgical innovations have made us the regional leader in cardiac care. Michael stared at me with complete bewilderment. You donated $12.5 million? Emma, where did you get that kind of money? Surgical patents, consulting fees, and some strategic investments in medical technology companies, I replied matter-of-factly. When you develop new surgical techniques, the licensing agreements can be quite lucrative. Plus, I serve on several corporate boards in the medical device industry. The surgery went perfectly. Victoria's recovery was swift and uncomplicated, thanks to the minimally invasive approach I'd developed and the state-of-the-art equipment I'd helped fund. As she was transferred to the cardiac recovery unit, Michael sat in stunned silence, processing the complete reversal of everything he thought he knew about his sister's life and career. Emma, I owe you a massive apology, he said finally. We all do. I've been completely wrong about everything. You weren't wrong about me working at a clinic, Michael. I do work there and I love it. You were wrong about thinking that was all I do and wrong about assuming it wasn't valuable work. Over the next few days, as Victoria recovered in one of the private suites I'd personally designed, Michael began to understand the full scope of my professional achievements. The phone calls from colleagues, the medical journals featuring my research, the pharmaceutical executives seeking my input on new cardiac devices. It all painted a picture of someone operating at the highest levels of medical practice and innovation. The family dynamic shifted dramatically once the truth emerged. The quarterly business meetings took on a different tone when Michael realized that his sister's annual income from patents, consulting, and surgical practice exceeded his law firm's total revenue. The career advice sessions stopped entirely when they learned that I was regularly consulted by the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic on complex cardiac cases. But what affected Michael most was watching me work. During Victoria's recovery, he saw me moving through the hospital with quiet authority, making life and death decisions, leading surgical teams, and advancing medical knowledge through research and innovation. The clinic worker he dismissed was actually saving lives and pioneering treatments that would benefit cardiac patients worldwide. As Victoria prepared for discharge, she took my hand and squeezed it gently. Emma, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life, and you did it after listening to us criticize your career for years. You don't need to thank me, Victoria. Taking care of family is what we do. Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. Emma, can I ask you something? Why do you still work at the community clinic? With everything else you have going on, why spend time there? I considered the question as I reviewed Victoria's discharge instructions. Because that's where I remember why I became a doctor in the first place. The cardiac surgery, the patents, the board positions, those are all important. But at Westside I take care of people who have nowhere else to go. It keeps me grounded in the actual purpose of medicine. As we walked to the parking garage, Michael shook his head in amazement. I can't believe I called you just a clinic worker. You're one of the most accomplished surgeons in the country, and I was too arrogant to see it. Michael, I am a clinic worker. I'm also a lot of other things. The mistake wasn't in observing what I do. It was in assuming you understood the full picture based on limited information. The drive home was quiet, each of us processing the events of the past week. Michael's phone buzzed with messages from family members who had heard about Victoria's surgery and, inevitably, about my role in saving her life. The story would spread quickly through our extended family and social circles. The relative they'd dismissed as underachieving was actually a world-renowned cardiac surgeon. Some family revelations end with awkward apologies and promises to do better. This one ended with my brother finally understanding that the person he thought he knew best had been operating at a level of professional excellence he'd never imagined possible. More importantly, it ended with Victoria alive and healthy, recovering from surgery performed by someone who had never stopped caring about helping people, regardless of whether they could afford to pay for it. The next time someone suggests that clinic work isn't real medicine, Michael will have a very different perspective to offer.